Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kircha. Coming up in today's newscast, the EU labeling ruling sparks an international delegation's visit to Jerusalem.
Israeli border police officers step up for their teammate in a very big way.
And we'll reveal where Israelis love to travel the most.
Looks like the fight against the EU court's labeling decision is far from over.
Dozens of ministers and parliament members from 25 different countries around the world are meeting in Jerusalem to protest the ruling.
All Israeli Jewish products produced in Judea and Samaria, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights must be labeled as such. That's the ruling that came from the EU High Court of Justice last month, causing an uproar in Israel. Pro-Israeli groups are calling the ruling discriminatory and one that clearly supports BDS. And that's why major political leaders from 25 different countries are here in Israel under the auspices of the Israel Allies Foundation. They're joining the fight, and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is thanking the delegation for their support, which even includes the president-elect of Guatemala. The Prime Minister says that there's no substitute for speaking the truth in the face of lies.
There are two kinds of friends that we have, friends of interest and friends of values. Sometimes they intersect as well. I think what is important about this group and this effort is that it is, first of all, based on values.
The visit has also included discussions about the U.S.'s change in settlement policy, and Netanyahu notes that the shift highlights an important historical fact. that Jews are not some foreign conquering entity, but rather a people returning to the homeland for which they're named, Judea. Likud Knesset member Gideon Saar is also condemning the international community's financial support for the Palestinian Authority, which pays terrorists and their families to attack Israeli civilians. The group will also tour Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, and they'll meet with families of terror victims. Among the visiting MPs are representatives from Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, South Africa, Croatia, Estonia, Macedonia, Sierra Leone, Slovakia, Finland, Sweden, Zambia, and more.
And now joining us on the line for more on the delegation to Israel organized by the Israel Allies Foundation, please welcome former member of Congress and chairman of the board of the Israel Allies Foundation, Dr. Dave Weldon. Dr. Weldon, thank you for being with us. Now, you were one of the founders of the IAF. Tell us a little bit about the delegation that is traveling to Israel and what their goal is.
Well, the IAF has been in existence for about 10, 12 years. We are in 40 countries around the world, and we're made up of mostly Christian, but some Jewish parliamentarians. And we had a major meeting in Jerusalem the last 3 days, and we had about 25 nations represented. And one of the things we did was tour the Judea and Samaria area, and we discussed at length the recent EU High Court decision as being basically anti-Semitic. We feel that it's very anti-Semitic, the way it's structured, and it's just wrong, and it's not a just decision from this supposed court of justice.
Now, since you founded this organization, have you seen a rise in anti-Semitism around the world? What is your take on what we're seeing take place in Europe, for example?
Well, that anti-Semitism was one of the topics we discussed, and there does appear to be a rise of reported anti-Semitic incidents globally, particularly in Europe. And we discussed the actions that parliamentarians need to take with their prime ministers, with their governments, to try to combat this. The slow rise of anti-Semitism is what occurred in the 1920s, back in the last century, and we don't want to see a repeat of that again. And it's critically important that Christians speak up, not just Jews. Christians need to speak up.
Well, this was clearly a very big deal to bring so many parliament members and politicians from around the world to Israel, and it will be interesting to see, how this plays out and how this trip affects the EU labeling ruling. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's been pleasure to be here. Pleasure to stand up for Israel, and thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Weldon.
In other news, buying your kids a load of toys for Hanukkah or a new Passover outfit can be tough financially, but over the last 12 months, it's not material possessions that Israelis are worried about. It's getting food on the table. And here to break down some shocking numbers from a recent report on food insecurity in this country is ILTV's Shanna Foltz. So Shanna, give us some numbers.
Okay, so unfortunately, 2.3 million out of Israel's roughly 8.7 million population are living under the poverty line.
It's nearly a quarter.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more.
Wow.
Yeah. It's quite a lot, and more than that, so there are a lot of different levels to poverty, right? So let's go right to the top. 30% of those who are impoverished say that they've lost weight in 2019 from not having a robust enough diet.
Right, so that's called food insecurity. And talk to us a little bit about the difference between food insecurity and then general poverty, because people don't always understand that difference.
Now, here in Israel, I think more than other nations, when we're talking about food insecurity, we're talking about people who are very worried that they don't know where their next meal is going to come from.
Right.
Now, that's food insecurity. Now, there's another aspect here where there's not getting the right nutrition. So you can be scared about not getting your food, or you can be somebody who is eating, let's say, white bread every single day of the week. So you know that you're going to have a meal, but it might not be good for you.
So what's the percentage of people who live in food insecurity here in Israel?
Okay, so the percentage of people living in food insecurity is, last year was 5.5%, and that's jumped up a whole percentage point to 6.5%. This year, they're food insecure. Now, 16% went from lacking nutrition last year to 18.5% this year. That means that, like I said, they're eating the same thing every day, and that's a whole 2.5% increase
so,
over 1 year.
The question is why, right? Why is this happening?
Okay, so one of the main points that I'm hearing from experts is that this year, what's the difference in 1 year, right? If the economy is pretty much in the same condition as it was last year, what is making this difference?
Right.
That we have had an unstable government. Now, when you don't have people in leadership positions making sure that those programs get the food to the people who need them, things fall through the cracks, and you're not thinking about those people who are down at the bottom who need these things. And I will just let you know also that 12% of people who are already receiving government assistance say that in 2019 they've stooped to levels such as looking through the garbage to find food to put on the table.
Well, now we know from most of these types of studies that children are typically hurt the hardest in this situation. How are they being affected here?
Okay, now the biggest issue that we're seeing is that 87% of people who are families who are currently receiving government support say that they cannot send their kids to any type of after-school activities whatsoever, and that includes school day trips that you might need to send in for your child, like a little extra money, or you might need to send them with a lunch. Those people can't afford to do it, and more than that, 28% of parents are reporting that they send their kids to school with no lunch and no food for the day. That's a crazy number.
So, and it's just important to keep in mind that this report comes from Latet, which is not actually the nation's social security agency. These are different numbers.
This is quote unquote the alternative poverty report from Israel. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, but shocking numbers, and I hope that the government can start tackling this issue in the way that it needs to.
Shanna,
Thank you.
All right, the crazy winter weather doesn't seem to be slowing down here in Israel.
That's right. Snowfall is touching down in the north. Cold is setting in the evenings, and record lightning storms are making their way across the Holy Land.
Seasonal showers are continuing in the Jewish state, and their effects seem to be getting more dangerous. For the second day in a row, heavy flooding across the country has trapped drivers and damaged homes and infrastructure. On Sunday, at least 6 people were rescued, including a pregnant woman from flooding in a tunnel. And then Monday, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and parts of Tel Aviv had all flooded over as well. Many cars had even become submerged under the 2 inches of rainfall, especially in underground garages. And in Yavne, 2 drivers were also rescued after getting stuck in the standing waters. Meanwhile, the Israel Nature and Parks Authority is temporarily closing hiking trails and nature reserve areas from the public due to the overflowing riverbeds. Thankfully, though, no injuries have been reported from the flooding Monday night. The IDF soldier who was struck by lightning on Sunday, on the other hand, remains in serious condition. And And still, there were several close calls. All IDF exercises in the Northern Command have even been put on pause following a Merkava tank overturning. And finally, the weather is predicted to move away from the country Tuesday night, which is good because the storm systems and infrastructure desperately need that time to recover ahead of another coming storm expected Thursday.
All right, let's talk sports. Athletes all over the world are preparing for the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan, or at least everywhere but in Russia. That's because the World Anti-Doping Agency has now decided to ban Russian delegations from all major events for the next 4 years, including the Tokyo Olympics and the upcoming World Cup.
Well, here now to discuss the details is Israeli sports journalist Amit Levintal. Amit, thank you so much for being with us now. What is Russia exactly being accused of?
Well, we're talking about a state-sponsored program of doping. In the proportions of it is mind-boggling.
Actually, this has been ongoing for years, no?
This has been going for the last decade, and we're talking. Russia hosted the 2014 Winter Olympics, and before that, they were preparing, and there was really a massive program involving the Kremlin, involving the KGB and other parts of the Russian government, the Russian authorities, and it was involving corruption, deception, including the people from Russian anti-doping agency. The Russian anti-doping agency participated in this mass corruption and in this massive scandal. And actually, we're talking about many athletes that were actually giving. They were giving some substances, illegal substances, and they were. Some of them won medals in some of the tournaments and
were they
the
required
Olympics.
to give those medals back?
Yes.
Right,
those who were caught gave their medal backs, but some were not caught. And some of the athletes from other countries are really mad. And not only in the main Olympics, also in other Olympics,
Right. So here's my question for you. What does that mean for Russian athletes who are not necessarily guilty of doping? And I mean, I'm interested to know how that will impact the rest of the teams, like Israel.
If anyone who can prove he's untainted can still participate as an independent athlete. And the only thing here in what will happen in Tokyo 2020, Russian athletes who are not accused of doping and they can prove they are okay, they can compete, but not under.
And how can they prove it when you're saying that the Russian doping agency was involved?
Yeah.
So how
no,
can
they can compete as individuals. They will not. What's important here? We will not see the Russian flag. We will not hear the Russian anthem. They will compete as individuals under the Olympic flag, and if they win their competition, we'll hear the Olympic, the Olympic anthem as well. So they cannot represent Russia. Now we need to.
So you're saying under the Olympic flag, that's who they would be representing?
Yes, and they already done it.
Because I just started thinking in my head about all of the Russian immigrants that are here in Israel, and I'm assuming there are many.
But if they're
who
representing
have the ability.
Israel, then that's not Russia.
Well, no. What I was going to say is that there are probably so many who have the ability to make Aliyah or immigrate to Israel and could represent Israel in the Olympics. But I don't know if we've been considering that.
Well, I think here, if there is no evidence that you did something wrong, you can still participate, in your sport, and that's the main issue. Now, we need to remember another thing. The Russian authorities and the Russian government still has 3 weeks, of course, to appeal against the ban they received. So it's not, the case is still not over, but it looks like, the Russians, they will not have a football team in 2022 World Cup in Qatar. And, of course, their athletes that are clean could compete in 2020, but under the Olympic flag and not under Russia.
It'll be interesting to see who appeals and whether or not that'll be successful.
And also how this impacts the performance of Israeli
I think
teams, So, unfortunately, no, we haven't.
I'm so sorry,
we could sit here and talk about this all day, but thank you so much for joining us. All right, now a group of Israeli commanders have just achieved a major feat. They've helped one of their colleagues, a 20-year-old border police officer, gain Israeli citizenship, something she didn't have even though she's lived here since the day that she was born. ILTV's Shanna Fold has that story.
Every time she heard a knock at the door, she feared it was the end of her happy family. When she was 14, her father was deported back to Thailand when his working visa for Israel expired. And though she had a temporary resident status, Jemaisa Yael Buntang never had what her colleagues and friends had: citizenship. Buntang was born to a Thai father and Filipina mother, who were both in Israel for work. Boontang's mother, Maria, cares for an elderly woman during the day who she says feels like a grandmother. And thanks to her advocacy, the Boontang family still lives in Israel. But just over a year ago, Boontang's Filipino passport expired, and that's when Operation Israeli Boontang began. You see, the 20-year-old went through Israeli schooling and, like her peers, moved on to the Israeli army where she works in the border police. So they found out that Boontang didn't have her citizenship yet, and her commanding officer, Uri Levy, appealed to the Population and Immigration Authority along with other commanders from her unit. And just a year later, the request was approved. Boontang pledged her allegiance in a naturalization ceremony at the Interior Ministry in Jerusalem, declaring loyalty to the State of Israel while she accepted her ID card. Boontang's officers say the citizenship is truly a special thing and that they are happy to have had the privilege of making her into not only a fine soldier, but a bona fide Israeli. Boontang's mother and 16-year-old sister, however, still have a temporary residence status, which does give them privileges of unemployment benefits and health care in addition to the right to work lawfully. But voting rights and select other benefits are not afforded. The Filipino embassy in Israel estimates 31,000 Filipinos are legally working and living in Israel among the country's most populated cities like Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. Just months ago, the country erupted in protests following arrests and deportations of foreign workers who had overstayed their visas. Many come to Israel to support senior citizens and then have children of their own who grow up with Hebrew as their mother tongue. Advocates say after decades of serving Jews and Israelis, especially the elderly, the government should be compassionate and let the children grow up in Israel where they have a better future than their parents' home countries, which are foreign to them.
All right, now we often talk about where to go in Israel when you're on vacation, but what about the Israelis who are already here, right, Aaron?
Exactly. Where do they like to go to spend their time off? Well, here with the answer is Israeli consumer behavior expert, Dr. Vili Abraham.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, so what is it? France, Portugal, tell us the favorite destinations for Israelis.
All right, so if we go in descending order, so it's London, that's number one, and then we have New York, Prague, Barcelona, and Vienna. These are the top five.
Yeah, especially because I think those get like from most expensive to least expensive in the list.
And
so it's not.
Well, most of the Israelis I know like to go to cheaper destinations.
Well, you know, actually, if you look into recent studies that were published about this, Israelis are not necessarily, they don't necessarily go to places that are cheap. They're just looking for good bargains. So it doesn't mean that Israelis won't go to London. London's also very famous, and Paris. So Israelis usually look for deals, and those who do look for something cheaper, they go to Georgia or Turkey. But a lot of Israelis go to the top places.
Well, I think, you know, what's really interesting is the fact that there are so many of these locations that I know most of the Americans that I know would never go to. Like you said, Georgia, Romania. These are
also
locations.
Israelis, not top five,
Not top five, but also huge destinations that Israelis like to go to because they're so close. Turkey, Greece.
Exactly.
Of course.
Some Israelis don't want to travel far away, so they take short haul flights.
Well, so keeping that in mind, why do Israelis prefer to go abroad rather than travel within the country? Because I think that's another statistic that we saw is that most Israelis, as you said, they're looking for bargains, but, you know, isn't the best bargain maybe staying in the country?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that people who usually do travel within Israel, if you're looking at Israelis, it's usually people from the higher socioeconomic status because it's more expensive oftentimes to travel within Israel itself. The average holiday would cost a lot more than it would cost, for example, in Turkey. If you look at, for example, the high seasons, whether it's in the summer or Pesach, for example.
So, prices of hotels.
Yeah, and prices of hotels are pretty expensive because we have a very, very significant shortage of rooms because of the bureaucracy. For example, in Europe, if you want to, you know, open a hotel, so from scratch, from the planning phase until you erect a hotel, it would take you somewhere between 2 years as opposed to 10 years here in Israel. So the bureaucracy is really, really
well, yeah, and I mean, I know so many Israelis are concerned about how many more Airbnbs are popping up now as a result of this issue. But, you know, how is the government pushing Israelis towards traveling more within the country? Because I understand that there are initiatives to try to promote Israeli tourism within Israel, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of initiatives. So, for example, Jerusalem is very big on this. They always try to attract Israelis to go there for the weekend. We also have the government trying to encourage Israelis to visit a lot. However, it's not really helping because Israelis still find it a lot more attractive to go abroad. But however, if you look at the statistics of tourists coming into the country, it's really fantastic. So if you guys want to talk
Yeah,
about
they don't
those,
really need the Israelis.
it really has been going up. For example, this year, by the end of the year, we expect to see somewhere around 4.6 million tourists coming into the country.
Wow.
Last year was 4.1 million, and they brought in 22 billion shekels into the economy, which is $1,500 per tourist. That's a serious boost to the economy.
And where are they coming from? Like, what kind of tourists are these?
Yeah, so 49% of tourists come either from the States, Germany, France, Russia, and the UK. These are...
So pretty much the same places we're going. We just swap places.
We're just swapping. And by the way, they're coming here especially for Tel Aviv, because Tel Aviv is a world brand. So they come for the nightlife, the culinary experience.
Well, and the beach.
Yeah. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, places to go.
Yes, thank you
so
for
much.
joining us. Yeah, we have to plan our next vacation now with this in mind.
But moving on, as per usual, there has been tons of entertainment news that ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with us now to share. Manuel?
Hey guys, so we have some very exciting news in the world of film this week. The English-Jewish actor Sacha Baron Cohen has landed himself a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor in a Limited Series for playing Israeli spy Eli Cohen in the Netflix show The Spy. Take a look.
Best performance by an actor in limited series or a motion picture made for television is here or there. Christopher Abbott, Catch-22. Sacha Baron Cohen, The Spy. Russell Crowe, The Loudest Voice. Jared Harris, Chernobyl. Sam Rockwell, Fosse Verdon.
All right, well, Tim Allen, I don't think looked so excited when he was announcing the nominees, but that is so exciting to hear and honestly, truly well-deserved in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's still hard for me to see Sacha Baron Cohen in such a serious role.
Right, exactly.
But he did a great job.
Yeah,
he did.
It really was, and the show itself was really well done. But this isn't Cohen's first Golden Globe nomination. Just last year, he was nominated for Best Musical or Comedy TV Actor in his role in Who is America, which was his satirical ambush show where he pranked politicians, if you recall.
We recall. That was definitely an interesting show, to say the least.
I remember reporting on it pretty much every week that there was something, even crazier than the week before.
Yes.
So what's up next, Emmanuel?
All right, well, earlier this week I shared with you guys that our very own Wonder Woman Gal Gadot posted a teaser for her very highly anticipated film Wonder Woman 1984, and the trailer is finally out. Check it out.
And greatness is not what you think.
What an epic role. I mean,
I know.
Since the first Wonder Woman film, I think that was actually the highest grossing movie of the 2017 summer. I feel like Gal Gadot has just been endlessly gracing our headlines, and it doesn't seem like she's planning on stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, that's most definitely the case with all her upcoming projects. So the trailer itself was actually released after it was first screened before fans in Brazil at the 2019 Comic-Con Experience event. Gadot got on stage with a legit army of cosplay fans to introduce the final trailer.
Wow, I'm so excited about this. So the whole plot of the new film is surrounding Wonder Woman in 1984, right?
Right. Gadot explained while on stage that the movie depicts Diana Prince, or Wonder Woman's life, in the year 1984, and how it was quite lonely until something, quote, crazy happens to her. So we're just going to have to wait and see what that is.
When is that coming out? I'm so excited to see this.
Yes, very soon, very soon.
Very soon. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Emmanuel.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be cloudy with a chance of rain and lows of around 51 or 11 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow, you can expect very little change with a high of 70 Fahrenheit or 17 degrees Celsius.
That's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchuk. Thanks so much for watching.